Hi, my name is Nancy Morales, and this is my presentation for my master's professional project. The title of my project is How New Educators Are Incorporating Technology into Their Post-COVID Classrooms. And this is being presented for Western Oregon University in June 2024. My project is focused on the use of technology because technology is the focus of my master's. I also wanted to talk about technology and do my project mainly focus on that because as a teacher who started teaching in 2021, it was when teachers were barely coming back from COVID and the use of technology was highly being used for obvious reasons. But I felt like when I started teaching, there was an amount of drop off after having to use it so much. Teachers kind of stopped using it. But growing up using technology in school during junior high, mostly through my high school experience, I knew that there was an importance and I really valued technology. So I wanted to see how we could use this and incorporate technology now in our classrooms in order to help benefit our students. So I'm going to start with my project rationale. I chose this project for those reasons that I stated before. Also because I just knew that there was benefits to using technology, and I know that there has to be a balance between the use of technology and us as teachers. It does not replace a teacher at all, but I know that we have so many things that we have to do as teachers, and I wanted to find things specifically that were going to help me as a teacher and lower my workload, as well as helping my students learn through the things that I was doing with technology. Also, when we feel more free and feel like we don't have to be doing so many things, our students get a better version of us. So there's lots of different reasons that I wanted to use technology and then to see the benefits that my students got from those things. The MSD learning outcomes that I aligned to, I talk about all three in my project. I'm going to focus on one for the presentation. I want to focus on the use of research and evidence to develop environments that support and assess learning and their professional practice. So using the literature and research that I did in my literature review, I found a lot of evidence and a lot of research that backed up what I already thought. So that was very helpful to kind of prove my thinking and then also give me evidence when I need to back up what I'm doing or need to back up what I think about the use of technology. And it also helps me just support and assess their learning and how I can use different things with technology to help students. The professional standard that I'm going to focus on for the presentation is educators continually improve their practice by learning from others and exploring proven and promising practice that leverage technology to boost student learning. So this goes along with the first one, using that research and learning from researchers who have been doing this for a lot longer than I have and who have things that they use that work well, learning from those things as well as developing ways in which I use them or different ways in which we can kind of progress the things that are already being used. My three teaching goals for the project. First, I wanted to understand how I, as a teacher who grew up with technology and using it in school as I grew up, am incorporating technology into my classroom on a daily basis. So, analyzing and reflecting how I was already using it. I also wanted to understand how the ways in which I was incorporating technology is helpful to students. So, what I was stating earlier about me learning different technology uses to lower my workload is eventually going to help my students, as well as types of technology that they're using can help them as well, which I'll talk about later in the methods and the project implementation. And then the last teaching goal was to understand how the use of technology in an elementary classroom can better help students and prepare them for their futures in school, as well as past general education for college and the workforce. So when I was growing up in high school, I used technology a lot, which meant that now as a teacher, I want to continue to use that technology because it was very efficient and helpful to me in school. So I want to make sure that the students in my classroom are using technology and are then able to use it in their futures as they're going into the workforce, even if they don't just become teachers, but they're able to use it in other professions that they want to do in the future. So for my literature review, there were 3 themes that stuck out to me. The first one being that teacher attitudes effect on the incorporation of technology. These are the researchers that I had in my project. I'm going to focus on Lee, who talked about how self-efficacy is if not one of the most important factors on teachers incorporating technology into the classroom, which makes complete sense. If the teacher does not feel confident and doesn't have self-efficacy when it comes to technology, they're not going to incorporate it. They're not going to use it. They're going to use what they know, even if it's like pen and paper. They're going to be using what they know, not something that they don't feel confident in. So their attitudes and their efficacy had a huge effect on technology, which I see in my school that I work in, and that I saw growing up as well. The other theme that I focused on was how the benefits that are seen in student attitudes through the use of technology. Again, these are the researchers who I talk about in my professional project. The one that I want to focus on here is Lewis, who talks about how using technology in the classroom can be motivating to students. That motivation is something that we don't see a lot because they're very focused on other things. Weirdly, in fact, is like the technology, right? Being on their phones or being on different things take away from like their learning in school. So if we're able to incorporate that in a way that's going to benefit their education, but you're bringing in that thing that they want to be using, then students are going to be motivated and they're going to want to do what we're doing in class, and they're going to want to do the learning that they're doing in the way that they would want, right? Which is through the use of the technology. And then the third theme that stood out to me was benefits to student learning through the use of technology. So what are they actually able to learn and benefit from through that use? The key researchers for this theme were the ones that follow. On this one, I wanted to focus on Dorman, who talks about how students with disabilities can greatly benefit through the use of technology, and not only like students who have disabilities, but for students who are learning a second language in a monolingual classroom, or even in my case in a dual language classroom. I have students who are learning Spanish, I have students who are learning English, and their language skills in either language vary like greatly. So there's a lot of different ways that I have incorporated technology using this project, and through other ways that those students aren't struggling as much, but they're benefiting from these uses because I'm able to scaffold for them or able to provide them the support that they need in whatever language it is that they need. And I don't have to be doing all that work with all 22 of my students at the same time. So what these scholars talked about or did influence my project? The first thing that was hugely beneficial to kind of just even my way of thinking was the idea of self-efficacy. I think this kind of drives everything. If the teacher isn't wanting to use technology because they don't feel confident, then that's going to be a detriment to the student's education and to what they're doing in the classroom. So in my project, and I talk about like greatly how teachers aren't provided with trainings for technology. They're not provided with professional development for the use of technology. All of our curriculum comes through books, but it also comes through a website, right? So there's going to be teachers who gravitate towards using the books. There's going to be teachers who gravitate towards using the website. I tend to go through the websites because that's what I feel more comfortable with, and it's easier for me to change that to a slideshow or to however I'm presenting my content to my students. If a teacher doesn't feel confident with that website, they're going to have to go through a lot more different hoops to get that curriculum from the paper to the students because they don't have that confidence of how to use it and how to navigate it. So that use of like trainings and professional development is huge. And I, as somebody who feels comfortable with those things, have helped my teammates and have provided like just small little tips, but even that can go a little step further, which I'll talk about in my last slide for implications on what I'm doing later. But it has a huge emphasis on what we're doing in our classroom and who's incorporating technology and who's not. The other thing that influenced my project was the different uses of technology. So a lot of the articles that I read were focused on AI, which I have been interested in for a while, but wasn't necessarily feeling like comfortable or confident on how I could incorporate it and how I can use it. And it gave me some ideas of ChatGPT or other websites that I could use to incorporate the AI to be helpful to me. And then the benefits for different students. So students who have disabilities as well as students who are English language learners, like understanding how that can benefit an array of different students was very helpful just for me in seeing that, and then how I could use different tools to help each different type of student. So how does my project add to my topic? I think the main thing is that I am a teacher in the actual classroom and I am using these things in my own classroom. A lot of the research that I saw and that I read was from researchers coming into somebody else's classroom and using technology and then taking data from that. But they're not the actual teacher in that classroom with those students for 9 months at a time. So I think it has a huge impact because I am the teacher in the classroom every single day with all these students, and I get to see the benefits and the drawbacks of these tools on a daily basis. And then the second is supporting positive use of AI for teachers. There's a lot of teachers that are scared of AI right now, and that 100% makes sense because I'm in elementary. It's a little bit different for me, but we can use AI in a way that's positive and that's a lot more helpful to us, which I will talk about in my next part, which is how I used the technology. So for the methods and process, the first thing that I decided on using was Magic School AI, specifically sentence starters. So I reflected on what my dual language students need, and I know that they need sentence starters in Spanish or in English. They need it all the time because it's very helpful for them. But I never had the time to sit down and to write sentence starters for everything that I was asking them to do in discussions, exit tickets, whatever it was. I just didn't have the time. So I wanted to find something that would be helpful. Through this, I evaluated the slides that we had already created for our ELA curriculum. I looked through those. I found where there was discussion questions, exit tickets, prompts, and I just took the prompt, took the questions, put them into Magic School AI, and it gave me the sentence starters, and then I just plugged those into the slide. So it was a much quicker process because I just copied, pasted from Magic School AI into the slide, and that was it. And my students were able to use those greatly as well. Yeah, and I'll talk about how that was helpful later on. So the second thing was Magic School AI. I used a text leveler from this website. I wanted to figure out what would help support readers at varying reading levels. I have a lot of emergent bilingual students who have been here for a year or less than a year, so they have very little English skills. I also have students who have been here for 2-3 years, and their English skills are still lower than what we're supposed to be doing in 4th grade. So I wanted to find something that would help support them in our regular ELA curriculum. I evaluated our iReady reading scores and what I saw in classroom to determine what levels would be helpful to them. I wanted to make sure that it was not too high for some of my students, but also not too low so that it was too easy for them. The next thing I looked at was the use of Flip, which was formerly known as Flipgrid. I wanted to look for ways to use technology for discussions, which we do all the time in our classroom and sometimes can get very repetitive and kind of boring for them because they've been doing it for so long. So I created a flip for my class and created a prompt to have students respond in different ways for formative assessment. And then the last thing I used was Screencastify, which was an accommodation for absent students or students needing to present in a different way. So for students who are maybe a little bit more scared of presenting in front of everybody, if they're speaking in their second language, they would be able to record themselves, or someone who wasn't there on a day of presentations, they could do it at a separate time, and it doesn't have to take time away from us already being done and moved on to something else. So here's some pictures of just kind of what I had. Here's the link and then an example of a grade 2 reading level for we were reading George versus George about the macroevolution. Here's the 3rd grade reading level. They're slightly different. There's not a huge difference based on just that grade level, but it was able to help a lot of my students who didn't understand the more complicated words and text that was in that book. Here's the image of the prompt that I presented in Flip for students' discussion. Next, we have the image of the sentence starters from Magic School AI. So the prompts are in the red on the top picture. And then this is the sentence starter. For that same lesson, we have an exit ticket, which students were provided with 3 sentence starters that Magic AI came up with and provided 3 of those. The next thing was a sentence frame for perspective for the welcome activity and an assignment that we were doing. And then I don't have an image for the Screencastify because it's just something that they created on their own. So how will this project influence my future as an educator? It gave me a deeper understanding of the importance of technology and how it can be used and how it can be helpful to me and to students. It helped me understand how the teacher's self-efficacy was a huge influence on the students' use of technology, how long they were using it, if they were using it. And it also provided me with some tools to use in the future, not just from the literature review, but from the tools that I used in my project, since I tried to use something different than I was already using in class. What went well and what was challenging? Sentence frames from Magic School AI were very helpful and supportive for students. I think I had, if not 100% of my students, most of my students use those sentence starters, and it helped them, it made them get started right away instead of just sitting there and not knowing what to do. The text leveler I found was kind of time consuming since there was a lot of pages in the text. It was very helpful, but even still copying and pasting and screenshotting the pictures of the book was very time consuming. So that, instead of making my job easier, maybe made it harder because there was so much other things that I had to do. For Flip, I think students enjoyed a different way of producing their answers and responding to each other with that use of the technology. And then Screencastify, I found it difficult to have students download it onto their Chrome as an extension and then use it. Once they did it one time, it was a lot easier for them to do it the second time, but it was very difficult for them to kind of figure it out from the beginning. So that took some time as well. And then for my implications, I'm going to use, obviously, the research that I gained from the literature review to support my use of the technology. I'm going to use the knowledge gained from the project to help other teachers incorporate technology through even just in my team or in professional development if I get to do that next year. And then for my learning outcome, which is to effectively apply the professional content, expertise, knowledge, and skills, I'm going to continue to use technology in my classroom, try to find different pieces of technology that I can use to incorporate into my classroom and try to effectively, through what I've learned, um, have other teachers try those things as well. And then use research and evidence to develop environments that support and assess learning through their professional practice. Continue to use sentence frames, text levelers to support students, and then sentence frames to assess students and to help them, propel them to show me what they know, because they just don't know how to get started. And then the last one is show commitment to and develop professional education leadership attributes. So I've already tried practicing those skills of going to another teacher and saying, hey, this works and this doesn't work. And then talking about those things and trying to help support other teachers' use of those pieces of technology for what they need. And that is all. Thank you so much for spending the time to listen to my project. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. Thank you.